This event today is in partnership with Minority Veterans of America, and I am grateful to have them lead this important conversation about the experiences and needs of minority women veterans impacting their mental health. As a note, we are recording this event today, and we will make it available later on the DVS YouTube channel for you to view and share. And I'll put the link to our channel in the chat in a moment. Before we begin, I want to express our grief and sadness over the traumatic events that took place in Buffalo over the weekend. This past Saturday, racist terror took the lives of 10 New Yorkers and wounded 3 others while they were at a grocery store. 11 of the victims were Black, and the perpetrator targeted that location to advance an agenda of racist hate. We stand with our fellow New Yorkers in Buffalo, and we reject the perpetrator's hateful lies purporting that anyone who is Black, brown, or any other minority is in any way less than an equal and vital member of any community or locality across the state and nation. Anyone in New York who is feeling the psychological impacts of this violence can call the New York Project Hope Line at 844-863-9314 for free and confidential mental health support. Again, any New Yorker impacted by this can call the New York Project Hope Line at 844-863-9314, and I'll drop that in the chat, as well as other mental health and community resources. We at the New York State Division of Veterans Services are also here to support you. You can reach out to us to access the benefits and services you have earned through your military service. And we also can help to connect you to the wealth of free and confidential mental health and peer counseling programs available for veterans across New York. You can call our intake line at 888-838-7697 to set up an appointment with one of our veterans benefits advisors near you. Again, that's 888-838-7697. It would be an honor to serve you. And I'll drop that number in the chat. And also, if you just reply to your Zoom invitation, that's me. And I can also help to connect you with somebody. If you or your organization provides services to veterans, please feel free to let us know in the chat who you are, what you do, and how folks can get in touch with you. We definitely want any veteran on this event to feel wrapped around with support and services. And with that, I would like to pass the mic over to the powerful and amazing Lucy Del Gaudio, who is Special Projects Manager for Minority Veterans of America, and she will be moderating our event today with the incredible panelists who you'll meet in a few minutes. Lucy is a fellow Army veteran and a tremendous advocate for veterans in the New York metro area and around the country. With that, please take it away, Lucy.
Thank you so much, and thank you all for being here today. Welcome everybody to this special event, Mental Health in the Margins, Understanding the Unique Needs of Minority Women Veterans, hosted in partnership with the New York State Division of Veterans Services and Minority Veterans of America. We're so grateful you've taken some time out of your afternoon to join us for this session. Today, we're going to unpack the experiences of women veterans who live in the margins. Women veterans are one of the fastest growing demographics in our veteran community. Over the course of the past several decades, programs and services have been established to serve the unique needs of women veterans. These programs have worked to address homelessness, suicide, social isolation, and more, but have often failed to fully understand the raging experiences of women veterans. Through all of it, there are pieces of the women veterans experience that are missed. Women veterans exist at the margins of veteran status, gender identity, and varied other identities that have hold in addition that shape their everyday lives, including race, sexual orientation, social economic class, survivor status, and more. As we look to the future of serving women veterans, it is imperative that we look to the margins of identity to understand how we could serve all our women veterans more effectively, authentically, and impactfully. Today, we're going to feature stories and voices of women veterans and those who serve them, who will help us deepen our understanding of the experience of women veterans who have multiple minority identities that will help us chart a path forward to serving all women veterans and their unique needs and experiences. Again, my name is Lucy Del Gaudio, and as a special projects manager for Minority Veterans of America, I am incredibly honored to be here for today's event. A little bit about myself. I am a U.S. Army veteran. I served 8 years from 90 to 98 during Operation Desert Storm, Desert Shield. I am a survivor of military sexual trauma. I am of Latino background. I am Puerto Rican Cuban, born and raised in the great state of New Jersey. With that being said, today's experiences are about our positives and negatives. Right now, I'm in my total mental health journey as I've developed my mental health toolkit to better get myself prepared for my everyday life, my experiences, and what I do to take care of myself. And I hope all the panelists will share those stories. This afternoon, we have some really great panelists in store ready to share, again, their experiences, their stories, the knowledge for us today. These folks are leaders, innovators, trailblazers, members of our community. Rather than read you all their bios, I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves, and we're going to get started right away. So question one, and we're going to go in the order of Jennifer, Susan, Maria, Ashley, and Sidney. Just introduce yourself, your name, and why you decided to serve. And Susan, if you could take it away.
Hi, can everyone hear me? Sorry for that. Hi, I'm Susan Sobrepena. I was born in the Philippines and became a naturalized citizen in the 90s. I was enlisted, and then afterwards I went to West Point. I graduated, and later on served as a company commander in Operation Enduring Freedom 7. So Afghanistan in 2006, 2007. And after my deployment, after my years served, I got out of the military in 2007. And I'm now in Manhattan. So nice to meet all of you.
Thank you, Susan. Jennifer?
Am a Army National Guard veteran. I was based out of Buffalo, New York. So thank you for noting that about the Buffalo community. I'm currently in New Jersey, but as you may know, if you know anyone from Buffalo, it's like we love our town. We always have an underdog spirit, and so I appreciate you bringing that up and speaking frankly about the nature of the white supremacist violence that happened there. And the need to keep an eye out for that and make sure we all speak up, no matter what community we're part of, that speak up and out against that. As I said, I was in the Army National Guard out of Buffalo. I was a track mechanic, although we didn't really use any track, surprise, in Buffalo. So I ended up working mostly wheeled vehicles. I left as a sergeant in 2005, and I was in from 2000 to 2005, so was part of the initial 9/11 activation, but my unit at that time didn't actually get into the city, but was definitely packing up trucks and heading down there on day of. I'm also, after I left the military, I was a co-founder of SWAN, the Service Women's Action Network, and part of our goal is just to kind of, especially at the time of the founding, was to collect women's voices, women veterans, and women active duty voices, and amplify that. At that time, a lot of the major organizations weren't really including women's voices, so that was a big part of why we formed, and hopefully continue to try to do that as we have grown and changed over time. So again, I'm currently based out of New Jersey, but I'm very happy to be part of this panel and look forward to the discussion. And I do have to leave at 1 o'clock, so if you see me jump off at that time, please know that that I didn't get lost, and and I appreciate everyone who's speaking today, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Jen. Ashley? Oh, I'm sorry, Maria is next.
Hi, hello everyone. My name is Maria Salazar. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I served from 2002 to 2011. I deployed to Iraq for the initial pump in 2003. I'm originally from Peru. My family migrated to the United States due to the terrorist situation in my country. So when 9/11 happened, I was 21 and it really triggered something in me. And this time I decided I was old enough to protect my family and my new home. So I joined the Marine Corps. I was a 0411 logistics. When I got out as a sergeant, my transition was a little bit easy. I became a Zumba instructor, but art has always been the one thing that stabilizes me and helps me to process life. So I founded Claymore Vets, which is a nonprofit that helps veterans and first responders with deep arts engagement in order to foster reconnection and social and post-traumatic growth. And yeah, I'm very excited to be part of this. I'm currently based out of New Jersey, but I lived in Long Island in New York for many years, and we do events throughout the tri-state area. And mental health is a big, I'm a big advocate for this, and I'm excited to be part of this today. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Ashley, you have the floor.
Hello, everybody. I'm Ashley Carothers. I use she, her pronouns. I am a very proud Air Force veteran, and I currently serve as the operations director for Minority Veterans of America. I served under DAT and after DAT, where did a lot of work overseas with the European commands to get DAT overturned. And once it was, we did a lot of work, spearheaded a lot of conversations and training with those commands on how best to support our military personnel with mental health services, especially in mind. Served from 2005 to 2013 with Operation Iraqi Freedom and in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. Currently reside in Washington, D.C. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Ashley. And last but not least, Sidney.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sidney Covington. I am an Army veteran. I use she, her pronouns. I just want to say, Kristen, thank you for mentioning what happened in Buffalo. I'm based in the Chicago area, but my mom and I were in the grocery store at the same time as that shooting. And so just imagine walking out of the grocery store and the first thing you read on the news is that Black people were targeted for simply going grocery shopping. So it shook me up all week. It's been very hard to process just thinking about it. So thank you for mentioning that. I served at Fort Hood, Texas. I was a medic. I am based in the Chicago area, but I did live in New York for a short period of time at the time I met Kristen. And so I'm really thankful to be on this panel and looking forward to hearing the discussions.
Thank you, Sidney. So before I go into a lot of deep questions, I want to give Jen the floor. Jen brings a very unique perspective to this panel with all the legislative work that Jen has done in our space. So Jen, if you could give me like just a 5-minute overview of what legislation looks like right now for women, how it can be impactful in a way with all our various needs and all our intersections. So you have the floor, get on that shoebox and tell us what's taking place right now in our times.
Well, I don't want to take all the credit. Well, not even, I don't want to take it. I can't take all the credit. SWAN is a small organization, but we have a very dedicated staff and, a number of people that have worked over time in various roles who have really been the engine, in the past few years to kind of keep the highlight on women veterans and the needs that we have and service members, active service members. But I would say, I think, one of the biggest things right now is just the passage of the legislation that just came through with the NDAA and the I Am Vanessa Guillen Act and all the changes that we've seen. I won't be able to go through all of them, but I will say that as a focus for an organization, one of the biggest things is implementation of those changes. A lot of those changes are awesome. There are things that people have been putting a lot of work into, a lot of different organizations, a lot of different people, individuals, especially, some of our Congress members, and, really pounding the pavement for a long time. And a lot of those have happened, and going forward, how those get implemented is going to be the biggest change, or the biggest thing to keep an eye on. Even just with basic training integrations, and changing the women in combat roles, integration in those instances has not gone completely smooth. It's not happened at the speed that people thought it was going to happen at. And so we're looking at the same things for a lot of the legislation that just changed, particularly around sexual assault and sexual harassment. We've seen, we've all who served in the military know that just because something's on the rule books doesn't necessarily mean that that's how it happens on the day-to-day. Things can get swept under the rug, which is obviously one of the big issues that we've all been focusing on. So, part of the limitation of an organization is we're not necessarily on the ground. So a big part of what organizations like SWAN have to do is listen to what people are saying, listen to what's going on, on the day-to-day basis now, after changes have been made. Certainly, I think we can all think of things in our own experience, where you can think of an issue that one person had, but when there's, an issue that multiple people are having over and over again, there's a larger change that has to happen. So, for us, that's been kind of like the focus, when you're pushing for something for so long and then something kind of happens, it's like, okay, great. What do we do? What do we do now? Type of thing. So I think that's the biggest thing that we've been, kind of looking at and trying to keep, an eye out and our ears open for. Again, that's something that people who are currently serving have to be able to bubble up, and we certainly have people that reach out to us and provide that kind of information. We have done surveys in the past. So, that's kind of a big thing is, how do we reach out to people and get people to provide that information to us so that we can. So, certainly that's something that I would, say it helps us. Help other people is to make sure that we kind of get that feedback from people who are in the military and who are currently and are seeing, what's kind of the actual impact of those changes. And I would say that the same thing with VA, right? So as people are transitioning in and out of the military, as they're potentially needing VA services, you hear horror stories about people trying to get into the VA or things that happen at the VA, but then you hear a whole lot of good stories about services that people are getting at the VA. So trying to get over that, kind of barrier and making sure people have the resources that they need, whether it's again, someone who's having an individual problem and then, someone can kind of rattle the chains and make sure that that individual issue is being addressed, or something's happening over and over again, is kind of the hardest thing I'd say for an organization to, kind of tackle, and just making sure that those, that information is being passed on. So, that's definitely something we've worked with other organizations on, working directly with Congress members to kind of be of an information pipeline as well. And then, of course, some of the changes with Roe, we've definitely worked on issues around contraception, and then trying to make sure that, I think we're all kind of trying to figure out what's going to happen with Roe just as civilians. And we know that historically, reproductive issues have been something that's been even more difficult. Access to reproductive care, to abortions, to contraception has been particularly difficult for people who are on active duty. So making sure that, those issues aren't going to get kind of ignored in the larger push around Roe. Because it's, I think, if what we've seen, we think might happen with the draft opinion, it's definitely going to be a big shakeup. And we know that with the Hyde Amendment that, a lot of issues just kind of get, well, this is the military Hyde Amendment, we can't do that. So to make sure that that's not forgotten and lost kind of in the conversation.
Okay, thank you so much for that. So now we're going to move on to our questions. And I'm going to point the first question to Susan first and then Jen. For all of its good and all of its bad. Service looks very different for everyone. Can you share a bit about some of the informative parts of your service, where and how many identities you hold that shaped your service? And Susan, I'll kick that start with you first.
Okay, well, first, I just wanted to say thank you to all the panel members here. You guys are more involved in the community of minority vets, and I wish I had known more about, you know, people or women veterans in this situation. So leading with that, from the time I was in the military to even now, more so when I was in the military, I didn't really see many people that looked like me, right? I didn't really see many immigrants. I've been to many duty stations and I've met many people, whether it was enlisted soldiers or officers, and, you know, here and there I would. And I bring that up because, and part of the reason why a lot of this is so new to me, hearing from other, you know, veterans, is because I always felt like I was alone back then. In many ways I still do now. And I think because of that, it made me, you know, I mean, everyone can say they work hard, but it really made me want to be, you know, better than I was back then. And I really wanted to work hard to, in a way, prove myself, right? That I was like the other soldiers, whether it was male, female, or everybody else. And, but at the same time, I always felt judged, right? Like either, you know, many times, even at West Point, I was the only girl in my class, like class of 10, I was the only female there. And I say that because it was hard to even talk to anyone about it. Like when you're walking around a campus, you don't see many people that look like you. And when you do talk to some people, right, they just dismiss what you say. Or, you know, even in the military, like you always have to, you know, be at par. You always have to be better than the person next to you, right? You always have to work harder because you don't want people to look down on you. In the military, and, you know, whether it was at West Point or even out in the Army, I've had people say such horrible things to me, you know, about immigrants, about, you know, females in the military. And many times, like, you know, you want to scream, you want to say something, but you're like, well, if I do, are they even going to do anything about it? Are they going to say anything about it? So it's like now when I hear back from many people that I served with, it didn't matter if they were at the time privates, sergeants, or even lieutenant colonels. A lot of the women tell me how things have happened to them, whether it's military sexual trauma, whether it's harassment. And I knew that things were happening, but it's just that people didn't really say much about it at the time because they were so scared. And even guys that I know, you know, men, lieutenant colonels and above now, I've heard some of them even say, oh, you know, discrimination, that doesn't happen. You know, we're a group of military people. We give everyone a fair shot. I'm like, yeah, but you really don't. And I bring that up because there's an entitlement that a lot of these people have. And I mean, I have a lot of male friends, you know, so it's not like I'm not seeing their point of view. But as a woman, you know, and as a minority, it's already hard being a woman. But then when you throw in the fact you're a person of color, if you want to put that, and an immigrant, you're just, I think, put in a different scenario many times. And I think that shaped me in the way that I am even now, because it's still hard to talk to people about it. And so I thank you guys for even having these groups that now I know about, and maybe I can get more involved now. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Susan, so much for your candor. And Jen, could you answer the question as well?
I forgot to put this in my my intro. I initially joined largely because I knew I wanted to go to college, but no one in my family had been. So I didn't really know what I wanted to do or feel like I had, you know, kind of the experience to do that. And certainly at that time, this was in, you know, 1999, 2000, you know, pushing college as something that the National Guard can help you attend was kind of, I would say, the impetus for joining. I grew up in North Carolina, so I was, you know, certainly around the military. There's, you know, a lot of places you go to be people in the military, but I don't think I knew anyone directly that was in the military at the time. So for me, it was, you know, wanting to kind of take that step to go to college and not really knowing what I wanted to do, and feeling like the military would kind of provide some of that guidance. And I'd be around other people that were in the kind of like a similar position, and would provide that kind of like a basis for me to kind of take that step, which, I remember in basic training, they had like a sergeant that was there helping with the training. And when we were about to graduate, he's like, very snide, congratulations on getting your college money. It was like, I was like, well, thank you. I earned it. Like I'm, it's not like this is an easy thing to do. And, my family didn't have any money for college. So, I'm still paying for a lot of student loans now, as I continued to go to college for many years after that. So that was kind of like, why I ended up joining. And then it was something that I kind of weighed, certainly with being a lesbian myself, and then with Don't Ask, Don't Tell being the policy at the time. I grew up in the South. I ended up moving back to Buffalo. I was born in Buffalo, moved back to Buffalo when I was 17. But the rest of the time I was in North Carolina, and I was, involved in church, as just about everyone down there is. And, people pretty much knew that I was gay, but it was kind of like a Don't Ask, Don't Tell life at that time. So I didn't think it would be that much of a difference joining the military under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, but it certainly was different, because it's different when the government is telling you, you can't talk about this. And of course, at the time, people know the term Don't Ask, Don't Tell, but it was really statement, act, or marriage. You couldn't make any statement about being a part of the LGBT community, any act, overt act, and no marriage, which at the time was illegal anyway, but or not legal. So it's different when you're being told by your government. And then for me, especially on 9/11, like I said, I got called up for 9/11. I was actually at a job interview, and they had a TV there, and I think it was actually the second tower came down, and I was like, oh, that's the second tower. And so I was like, cut the interview short. I'm like, I'm going to get called up. So I'm going to go home, and I don't think this job is going to work out, because I don't know what's going to end up happening. And sure enough, I got home and there's already a message on the machine to go. So, I rushed there, and I ended up needing my dad to bring some stuff to me, because I had rushed there. So he and my stepmom, and at the time my girlfriend came, because we were all just kind of saying goodbye that evening to people, because we didn't know how long we were going to be down there for. And, obviously with Don't Ask, Don't Tell, like my girlfriend was there, and I was just like, okay, hey, bye, like, see ya. And to kind of have that, certainly what people were experiencing in New York, and kind of like the fear across the country. And then to be, told by your government, essentially, like, you can't hug someone and you can't show someone who's, the important person in your life. Like that had a different way than, choosing as a teenager to not say anything at church. There's certainly a different weight to it. And I think there's a lot of, kind of unresolved issues that, probably I have, and a lot of people who served under Don't Ask, Don't Tell have, around, sitting with that, and kind of living that life where you do have to hide so much of yourself. And it was somewhat unique being in the National Guard, because again, it's no statement, act, or marriage. And you're at the Guard for, 1 week in a month and 2 weeks in the summer generally. But every other day you're still under the policy. Just because you're not in uniform doesn't mean you're not under the policy, because someone that you serve with could see you at, anywhere you're out and about at. And so you're always kind of living with that, fear of kind of being found out. And, I think, there was, not an underground community, but certainly, like, you knew who the other gay people were in my unit, at least. I can't speak for everyone else, but in my unit, we would all kind of like hang out. We knew who each other were, or you'd be at like a gay bar and you'd see someone else who you knew, from the military, and you might not have known that they were part of the LGBT community, like, you too, like, kind of a thing. So it definitely brought, us together in that way. And there was a unique community, and I don't know that, it's certainly, I'm not like pining away for those times where we like had to have that community, but I do think there was something valuable to that community, that I don't know that everyone is kind of getting that community now. So there was an aspect of support to that. So I think we do still need to work to make sure we have community for people who are in different types of, minority affiliations. But, certainly it was, thankfully, Don't Ask, Don't Tell is gone now, and that people aren't having to live with that on top of everything else.
Thank you, Jen, for your candor as well. I'm going to direct the next question to Maria, Ashley, and Sydney. Mental health during the service. The military has changed its tune over the years relating to mental health. And to put it lightly, mental health hasn't always been their priority. Can you all share a bit about what mental health looked like during your service? What was the culture of support around accessing the necessary mental health resources when you needed them the most? And I'm going to kick that off to Maria to start.
Oh, brother. So this is back in 2003, right? When we came back from our deployment, and we were doing our demobilization checkout list or whatever. And I vividly remember one of our staff sergeants being like, don't say anything because they're going to keep you here, right? This is when we were at Camp Pendleton. And so we just spent, 7-8 months in country. All of us want to see our family. So we were like, yeah, I'm good. Nothing, I'm great. Give me my walking papers, but back then, and I hate to say this, but the Marine Corps is the least mental health friendly branch. We have a very destructive mentality to build up warriors, and so mental health, any mental health illness is seen as your weakness, and you're berated for it. I remember when I think I was a corporal at the time, one of my sergeants actually ended up having to get sent to a 72-hour hold. He asked for help. He's like, hey, I'm having a hard time. I'm suicidal, and instead of him getting the help that he needed, he got in trouble for it because he was seen as a poor leader. In the Marine Corps, they got more flowery choice words for this. Yeah, so I think the mentality as a culture of the military has changed a lot. I was very hopeful to see that our leaders were being more open about it, and speaking in terms of an illness and injury, whether it's visible or not. It's it's okay to talk about, right? Like when we break our legs, go to the doctor, get a cast, right? If we have a mental injury, why are we not given the same grace? And I think I'm hopeful that now, especially for the Marine Corps, but the military in a whole, we're really looking at the entire veteran ecosystem that makes a good warrior, right? If we're not mentally healthy, there's no, we're not going to be mission capable. And the fact that they're addressing this now and they're making it, important, and I think they're actually being active, participants about it. I'm hopeful that we're changing it. But I think conversations like these are important because once we remove the stigma out of, the mental health arena, it makes it easier for people to have conversations and address the issues. And I mean, we're out already, so we don't really have any skin in the game. But I think tapping into the people that are still in, because they could affect the change from the inside out. It's very important. So,
Thank you, Maria. Ashley.
So when I was in Iraq, we definitely didn't have any sort of mental health support at all. You had each other, but even then you didn't really talk about things that were happening around you, things you were seeing. You just kind of sucked it up and worked long hours, drank tons of coffee, tons of Rippets, and just kept it moving. Coming back, there was also no reintegration process. It was a short briefing of really nothing. When we were leaving Iraq, we were under attack as we were trying to leave. So everybody's, got that fresh in their mind. And then you land back on American soil and there's nobody there. There's just like 3 of you together trying to get back to the same base because everybody kind of dispersed. And you're kind of just left hanging. You're tossed back into what was normal, what was once normal, and you don't know how to act. You don't have at that time we weren't taking any civilian clothes with us. So we're all in uniform. Everybody knows why you're there. People are like, oh, welcome home. And it's just like, okay, great, thanks. Get back to base. And after days of trying, and it was, okay, great, welcome back, turn in weapon, turn in gear, and go have fun on R&R. Okay, well, I don't want to sleep in my own bed. It's too quiet. There's just things that are abnormal now. And there's nobody to talk to, nobody to turn to. Mental health was still kind of hush hush. And so for the probably first 6-8 months of being back, you are just kind of trudging along in the mud on your own. And the only people that you really are able to connect with are those that, you were with. But even then, you don't really talk about things. And so it took a while for me to seek mental health, to seek help. And even before I did, I asked, my superiors, what's going to happen if I go to mental health? Am I going to lose clearance? Or are they going to, what's going to happen? And they said, oh, no, you'll be fine. But there was still a hesitancy. Luckily, they pushed me and they were like, no, you should definitely go talk to somebody, seek help, get help. But, even years later, deploying again, it was the same process. Welcome back. You gave each other a high five and you were on R&R. And you're just left to kind of reintegrate on your own. And that was incredibly difficult to kind of have to go through, because, even while you're there, the first night we landed, it's dark, we're already getting attacked, and I'm being handed a whistle and told to walk with a buddy because you're a female, and don't go near generators, don't go near the HESCO barriers, don't go anywhere alone, basically, because you're going to get raped. And it's just like, but we're all here for like one mission, right? And now I got to worry about that too. So it was a very traumatic experience, getting there, being there, and then even coming home. And even years later, depending on, I moved to Germany, was stationed in Germany, and the unit that I was with there, because of what our job was, if you had to seek just a regular doctor, you had a physical, you would have to come off of PVP. So you could go and seek health care, and then everybody knew that you were brought off of work because you had a medical appointment. So if you had a mental health appointment, all the red lights were going. And that was in, 2009. So then when I needed to re-seek assistance, I chose not to, because, well, I'm not going to be able to perform my duties, and everybody's going to know that I'm at mental health. And so it was back in that gray area of, I went from one supportive unit, now I'm with one where it's, sure, they want you to get help, but they really don't, because everybody's going to know what's going on.
It's amazing how they utilized R&R for, that's the way they rectified our mental well-being. I remember coming home after deployment in Germany, and they sent me to Berchtesgaden for the weekend. And I'm like, what good is this going to do to me? Like, I'm going to sit here in a barracks in Berchtesgaden, and that's supposed to be rectifying my well-being. It's amazing. Thank you, Ashley, for sharing your insight. Sidney, could you share what mental health looked like for you during service?
Yeah, I want to also kind of point out, I'm a licensed social worker, not clinically licensed, but when, as social workers, we think about the whole entire picture. And so oftentimes service members come into the military with trauma already. And that's something that's never really talked about. Like, one of the reasons why I joined the military was because I was a homeless college student. And so think about that trauma that already occurred that even made it where I wanted to join the military. And so you already have that effect on it, like that compounding effect. You go to basic training, and even though like we make jokes about how they're making basic training soft, but basic training is still pretty traumatic. Like I remember some of the things that was said to me while I was in basic training. There were multiple times where like I would get so angry with the things my drill sergeant was saying to me, and I was just like, I can't respond because this is what I'm just supposed to put up with, right? Like, and how traumatizing that can be, especially if you come from families where you are given negative opinions all the time. And so like you have all these compounding effects that are just essentially happening in your military service that is really ignored. And so when I joined the military, like I dealt with a lot. Like when I got to my first unit after basic training, my first NCO, she was garbage. Like she just was this, like just terrible. I hated her so much. She wasn't one of those leaders that actually helped make you feel like, oh, I want to be a leader too. I want to stay in the military long term. She wasn't supportive. I remember my first week, my first sergeant was out. He came back and he did like a equipment inspection on all of our equipment to make sure our names were actually sewn on our gear. I'm new to the unit. How was I supposed to know my name needed to be sewn on my gear? And my other colleague, my other battle buddy who joined with me, she joined the unit the same week. I heard her NCO take accountability, like, you know, I hadn't told her yet. I'll make sure she's squared away before the end of the day. And I'm like, oh, my NCO is gonna do the same thing. Nope, actually the complete opposite. She was like, I told her her name was supposed to be on her stuff. I don't know why she's being ate up. And I'm sitting there like, what the hell? Like, I just joined the unit a week ago. It's like if you think about all these like minor things that can happen in your unit. And I switched units. I ended up switching to a new unit, which at first was terrible. Like, I remember one of the guys, we were going over first names and someone was like, oh, I wasn't expecting your first name to be Sidney. I thought it was gonna be like something challenging to say, or like, you know, like it was one of those things where you have all these like minor microaggressions that happen in your service that no one actually talks about, that adds to trauma, that adds to the ability to feel like you can be a part of a team. That adds to your mental health, because just scratch deployment, because I did deploy, but scratch all that. But think about all these little things that kind of build up before you even go on deployment. And you have to question, can I even trust the people I'm going out with? Can I ensure, like, do I know for certain they will pull the trigger for me? And then you start to question if you want to do the same for them. Like, you know, like, because all these little micro things that have added up where there's resentment, there's anger. And so that's something that's never really fully talked about when you're thinking about the whole person when they're serving in the military, because we all have different identities. Like I'm not, I don't belong to the LGBTQ community, but I remember when I was in AIT, Don't Ask, Don't Tell was first lifted, and someone who we were serving with, and I remember she comes in and she's like, I'm a lesbian, but I don't want any of you. And everyone's like, but we already do that. Like no one, like no one actually cares. Like, it's one of those things, like you didn't have to come out to us. We already, like, I mean, like we didn't think anything of it. I don't give a damn. I mean, I'm still showering in front of you. I don't care. Like I'm not questioning if you want me. Like we're all in this together. So, but like the fact that she even felt like she couldn't share that about herself, or she couldn't show her preference for who she would want today, even though it was no one in the Bay. But it's like the fact that she couldn't do that, like, and how much that mental impact that can have for someone who's serving, just alone, like all those things. And I did end up deploying, but I don't think I had the impact of deployment didn't impact me until I got out of the military. So I was fine. I was chugging on just fine. But then I've also had like a traumatic background. So for me, it's like you just chug along, you keep going. And so that was just a natural response, which the military just fed into what I already knew as a child growing up in a community that doesn't support mental health. You take everything to God and God's supposed to fix it. I don't know. Don't believe that today, but it's just like when you join a career that has that similar mentality, essentially, it kind of makes it easier to kind of say, oh, I don't address mental health issues. And I remember before I got out of the military, we had someone who did go see, I was a medic, and we would have people come try to talk to us. And at the time, I'm not trained in anything. And I was like, you need to go see the social work, like you need to go see mental health. And they look at me like I'm crazy. And I'm like, yeah, dude, I treat trauma. Like if your leg is like blown out, like that's my job. I treat trauma. I don't treat mental health. Like we have people who do that, but I didn't realize, like, me being someone who's like pushing for the service that we have provided, because we did have mental health techs who'd come once a month, and we did have a social worker who was attached to our unit. but talking to them would get you called crazy, or it just was never something that was positive. And I remember getting out and someone was actually going to go see the mental health professional every week. And there was one time we had an early formation to get off early, and our first sergeant was a lot, and we would have to do attendance at our formations. And so he was going off the names, and then someone was like, oh, so-and-so is at an appointment. He's like, oh yeah, I forgot so-and-so is going to go see the crazy doctor. And so imagine there's people who may be in formation was on the fence of wanting to go get services, and now they're hearing their first sergeant say, oh, so-and-so is going to go see the crazy doctor. Now you don't want to seem like you're crazy. And the fact that he could even say that out loud, as a civilian who works now, I'm like, that's such a HIPAA violation. It's no one's business where he went. But in the military, they can get away with it because a HIPAA is the very loose document that doesn't have a lot of standing, which is actually really sad, because it should have the same standing in the military as it does in the civilian sector, which he should have gotten in trouble for sharing where this person was. No one needed to know which appointment he was at. We just need to know he was absent for a valid reason, and that's it. And so I just thinking about that and thinking about my own transition, what was all this compounding things that happened before my military service, why I joined the military, and then dealing with the multiple identities I have as a Black woman serving, and having to deal with the challenges. I remember I had one of my NCOs, which he borderline, he was one of my favorite, but I also hated him because he would always say comments like, oh, you're a one, I remember I joined the military running a 17-something 2-mile, and I left running a 13-something 2-mile. And my 13-something 2-mile still wasn't good enough because I didn't run a 12-something 2-mile minute in in Iraq. And it was you just will never be that good. And it's dude, I actually cut 4 minutes off my damn run. And that's actually really good. So it's you're always having this sense of inadequacy that almost happens when you get into the civilian sector. And so for me, my mental health I didn't have challenges with it until I was out of the environment where it was so controlled, so structured that I didn't realize all those things that were compounding that impacted me.
Yeah, it's amazing how, again, I hid a lot of my mental illness until I had a huge anxiety attack at work because someone spoke to me in a certain way and it totally triggered me. And next thing I know, I'm being carted out in a stretcher out of a big conference because I had this mental breakdown. And then if it wasn't for my husband at the hospital to say, my wife served, then my treatment was treated differently. So thank you, Sidney, for sharing that, because sometimes we all feel that we were the only ones that were being perceived that way during our service. So thank you for sharing that story with us. The next question I'm going to throw to Susan. As you talk about transition, as you transitioned from your service, you talked about the lack of not knowing services. Did you have types of support that you were looking for? Were there any support structures in place that you could rely on? And for the need of your time?
Right. So when I got out of the military, like I said, I was in Afghanistan. I was a captain. I was a company commander. I got out of, when I actually got out of the Army, though, after a return, I left Fort Drum on a Friday. That Monday, I was an analyst for a financial company here in New York City. So I had 2 days to get myself together. And prior to getting out, you'd hear things like, oh, everyone, we really support our veterans because less than half of 1% serve. So, when you come out here, we're going to be supportive of you. Yeah. Okay. Now you get to New York City. It's no, they're not, no one is really supportive. I had no idea there were even any groups that existed. And I think for me, when I was still in, of course, I had a lot of positive experiences, but at the same time, I had many negative experiences, right? And I think part of the reason too, I didn't seek out anyone to talk to or any groups is because it got to a point that I probably hated 75% of the people that were around me. I was I don't want to have anything to do with anybody. I don't give a damn if you're a veteran, leave me the hell alone. So from my experience in the Army, in the military, I was well, if I have to work 18 hour, 19 19 hours, I'd rather do that and make myself a wealthy woman. Like, I don't want to do this. So when I got out as an analyst, I probably had like 2 or 3 jobs at a time. I didn't know anything about any veteran services. I just kept to myself and just kept grinding. And, unlike, the women here who are supported, you work in groups that actually help veterans. My background is in real estate. So professional and personal career, like I became a landlord, just kept grinding, and buying property, and just became a landlord and hired, people to help me because it meant less interaction with tenants. Like I didn't want to talk to anyone because every time somebody would say something, even if I was dating, even a boyfriend, he said something, I would think back to the way I was treated in the military. And I was like, what did you say? And I'm only like 5 feet tall. It's like, you get so angry at everyone because you remember not being able to, to speak or stand up for yourself. So I wish I had had that help before, but, in many ways, I think it shaped me now because I took all, that stress, and all I did was, go to school, finish my MBA and work, just so I could make it to a point that I didn't have to worry about, income coming in, just so I wouldn't be in a position where, like in the military, you worked, to get your paycheck. I just wanted to be independent and not near anything or anybody that reminded me of being a veteran. And although I was proud to serve, when I got out, I didn't even want to talk about it. I didn't want to be around any other veterans. I was like a woman of one. That's it. And so that's where it is now. So.
And thank you, Susan. I know how it feels like that. When I came out, I felt like I had no services whatsoever. And I had none because I wasn't pointed in the right direction. And thank you for sharing that with us. Jen, I know you have to leave at 1 o'clock. So I'm going to throw this question at you on finding what you've lost. When folks talk about post-military life, they often talk about finding your sense of purpose. Do you think that this phase is universally what you are looking for? Did parts of your identity make it challenging or more complicated to find your sense of purpose after service?
I think for me, when I got out, I kind of did the opposite of like kind of what Susan did, and kind of sought out a lot of veterans, and then ended up kind of getting involved in different like veterans retreats, and some of the really good ones, like the Women of Color Resource Center out of California, which they folded a few years back, but they put together some really good retreats, and I think that was helpful. I think a lot of us, we feel tough, being in the military, and then we don't want to kind of do like the crunchy, like, get in touch with your emotions type of thing. And certainly, I can't speak for everyone else, but I'm sure that a lot of us still struggle with that. And, so it was hard, to do some of that. And looking back, I don't think I realized it at the time, but looking back now, I think a lot of that was really helpful, because it did give me a sense of community. And then, some of those retreats, ended up being kind of like the genesis of SWAN, the group of women that were there. The Women of Color Resource Center brought together a group of veterans, and then that group was the one that kind of, said, hey, we want to do something. We keep saying the same story over and over again, or different variations of the same story. And so for me, that was helpful. But at the same time, I was in the National Guard. I got out, after 5 years. I technically got out on a medical for my feet. So I wasn't, put in contact with any VA services. I've very limited amount of VA services that I even think that I qualify for, because even, with the Guard, you're not getting the same level. If you're deployed overseas, you will, but if you're, not deployed overseas, which I was not, the services are not the same, or at least your access to it, your ability to access those are not the same. So I definitely was looking outside of that. And I don't even think I was looking. I think I just ended up finding it outside of that. But I think it's important for everyone to try to get connected to that. And because I did find some things that I was eligible for, and I was like, oh, look at that. Didn't realize it right away. so I think it's important, for people to try to do that, but it's, trying to make that transition. I think a lot of us, especially some of the things that Sidney was saying too, I think we have gone through some things that are really tough, and I certainly heard this what Susan was saying too. We went through some things that were really tough in the military, so I think we kind of like push aside things that we face, in the civilian life, because like, well, this isn't as bad as that was. We can't do that. Like that's only going to lead to kind of more weight on our shoulders, and to a point that some of us are not going to be able to continue forward like we think we're going to, and we either have to find help, or we'll be introduced to help on a stretcher, as Lucy said. So that's, I think, a very poignant example. Like we really have to kind of look at ourselves, and reach out, in whatever way that we feel comfortable, whether it just be one-on-one or to other groups. But we certainly face a different set of barriers, coming into that. And especially even what Susan was saying with, being involved in different groups, if you're working at a company that has those groups, sometimes they can be beneficial. Sometimes they can just feel like a burden. I've certainly felt both of those. So you kind of have to figure out what works for you, but you do have to take some initiative to look for those and see what is going to work for you. But again, sometimes that's hard for us, because I think, especially coming from a military background, we're really used to helping other people and not always as used to helping ourselves. So we have to realize that is just as valid. That's just as important, especially if we want to help other people in our daily lives. You really have to take care of yourself first so you can do that. So, I think that's one of the biggest things that I hope that we can learn as veterans, both as veterans and the people who are active duty and transitioning out. It's been really good to hear like some of the changes I think that active duty has had around mental health. Certainly those need to continue, but we're not there yet. And I think especially people who are veterans, making sure that we're cognizant of that and not forgetting to take care of ourselves. And that's just as important as taking care of other people.
Thank you, Jen. And again, thank you for the time you gave us for the panel. I know that you have a 1 o'clock, but I truly appreciate you being here with us this time, and always great to see you. Okay.
Well, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate everyone. And I've written down all your names. I'm definitely going to get in contact with everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. So the next question I'm going to point to Maria and Ashley. As minority women veterans accessing traditionally accepted spaces for care, such as VA for mental and physical health services, can bring with it different complexities, challenges, overall concerns. What will y'all say your experiences accessing care have been, and are there identify related challenges you face when you're trying to access your care? So Maria, I'll toss this one to you first, and then Ashley.
I think it's like a two-tier issue for especially for us Latinas, right? Because the first thing is swallowing that pride pill that I need help, right? Especially within our community, we don't talk about stuff, like we don't talk about Bruno, like literally that's it. Like we don't talk about anything, and for our families to be okay with us saying like, hey, I need some backup here. I think that's the first step. But then once you actually get into the VA or any type of healthcare, I think they always look at your background. If you're Latin, oh well, it's the way you eat, or it's it's, they kind of downgrade things, right? Or it's like maybe you're just what is that word? God, you're too emotional, right? Like they go back to like your cultural background, like, oh no, Latinas are just so loud and you're always so angry, and it's like, no, I'm not being reactive because I'm Latina. I'm being reactive because of my trauma, and I don't know how to handle this. Like don't minimize what I'm telling you. Don't minimize my narrative and my story because you have a judgment of what my cultural is stereotyped as. And I've had that throughout, my dealings with the VA. as where I felt that I wasn't being really heard. And I've tried to even find women providers, because you would think that women would, see eye to eye, but that's not always the case either. And so I think the biggest thing that I've learned, and this comes a lot too from our background, like I think I'm the oldest of 3 girls, right? So I grew up not being able to talk back to my parents, right? It's like, you do what I say because I'm telling you. So I was never able to validate my story and stand up for myself and really, advocate for me. I just had to be like, okay, I put my head down and I'm doing this. So that has to be the biggest hurdle that I've had to overcome, and own my story and what I'm telling you, like, please listen to me. And I've learned to give myself grace when I don't step up to the plate, because still happens to this day, like if I feel that I'm being, if I'm up to like a big challenge or a conflict, when it's advocating myself, I think in order to avoid conflict, I just kind of step back and I'm like, okay, never mind, I got this, and then I go back to like hyper independence, where I've always been known, like Susan was saying, like, leave me alone, I'll handle this myself. So finding advocates within the system that do understand our cultural diversity is important, and being able to teach people that our backgrounds, our cultural upbringing shouldn't be a hindrance to the care that we receive,
Thank you, Maria. Yeah, it's definitely the cultural barriers of when you start saying the word that therapy is definitely very interesting. I'm probably the first person in my immediate family, from my brothers and sisters, that actually like actively did therapy, and it was very frowned upon, but I had to do it, and it's made a world of difference with my family ecosystem. Ashley, could you share about your accessing care story? And again, any challenges or how you experienced your access of care?
Definitely. So lots of challenges going into the VA in Kansas City. That was the first VA I went to after service, and walking in for medical care for a ton of things that the VA did, give me a disability rating for, but it was challenging because every time I'd walk in the door, I was looked at, as somebody's spouse or somebody's daughter. Who are you here with? Well, I'm the veteran. Oh, okay, great. At that time, they didn't have a separate location for, the women's clinic. So it was kind of all together. So you're in a waiting room with a bunch of veterans from, various eras and services that are looking at you like, why are you here? Why do you have short hair? Why do you look the way you do? And even with talking with providers, the question of, is there a chance you could be pregnant? No, there's no chance I can be pregnant. I can guarantee you there's no chance. And they always ask, well, why is that? Well, because I'm a lesbian, so you're constantly always coming out. And then, they're like, well, okay, so why are you here? Mental health was a challenge to seek. There was a hefty waiting list at Kansas City. Then when we moved to North Chicago, was able to get into the VRU program and was able to seek mental health assistance. The first appointment I had, the provider didn't even look up at me. And as soon as I was done basically giving a short version of why I was there and my story, he just looked at me and said, oh, I think we should just put you on medication. And I was like, I've never had to have medication before. The providers that I've had before, there was never a discussion I don't want to be on medication. Why on earth do you want to put me on medication? Well, because it's going to help you 100% and you're not going to have any issues. And I was like, that's not how this works. So, leaving angry, leaving with constant bad interactions with different providers, as Maria alluded to, you would think it would be different, with a female provider. So you seek out those female providers. And even then, if you get a female OBGYN, they're still like clueless for your healthcare. And it's just like, okay, you're obviously drinking from the same Kool-Aid that the rest of the VA providers are. And you have horrible bedside manners, so you just are constantly seeking help elsewhere. To the point, I use a different veteran service organization for mental health care, just to access that, because the VA here in DC, it was a 3-month wait. And then, well, you can go see, one of our partners, but that's also going to be like a 3-month wait. Well, what happens if I need it now? I'm not at the point where I'm going to harm myself or I'm thinking about harming somebody or what have you, but what if I was and I couldn't speak to anybody? And your decision is for me to go to the ER and talk to somebody for 1 minute. You know what I mean? That's not helpful for me. It's not going to get me direct access immediately to anybody. So it's always a constant battle and fight. And then if your provider leaves for any reason, or there's not enough providers. So even if you do get a provider, you're not going to have like a regular cadence to seeing them. So when that provider wants to see you once a week, sometimes it's not even possible because there's so many clients that they have that they just can't keep up with it. So again, you just seek healthcare elsewhere, even though you should be able to go to the VA. And then it's, every time they want to look at your VA benefits again, well, now I got to go trudge around to all these different providers that I've had from all over different cities, different states, and get all that information, back over to them to show them, yes, yeah, you still need to be giving me my benefits. So it's incredibly difficult all the time.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing. I have a friend whose son had a horrible time finding to get his meds prescribed, that he ended up taking his dog's Prozac because they wouldn't refill his. His dog had more access to Prozac than he did. So yeah, thank you, Ashley, for sharing that. Sidney, I'm going to toss this one to you, and especially since you're a provider and I want to really get your sense of it. It's about COVID. There's no part of the world that wasn't untouched during COVID, and veterans were certainly no stranger to the impacts. Isolation compounded with increased likelihood of having to endure and living with complex mental health challenges. What did the pandemic do for your mental health, and did you seek support, or what type of needs did you endure during the COVID time period?
Yeah, COVID was strange for me because as I said, I was living in New York. I actually was living in New York when the pandemic hit. And I was at a point in my life where I was tired of the subway. I was tired of being in crowded spaces, because that's what New York is. Just crowded spaces all the time. And I honestly was like, I just need a break. Like, I just need to not to have to go on the subway for like a good 2 weeks, just something just to get me away from all this. So when the shutdown happened, I was like, oh my answers were just prayer. Like, I mean, my prayers were just answered. Said that backwards. But like, it was one of those things where I was just like, this is what I need. So the first like month and a half, I was in love, because I was tired of crowded subways. I was just tired of so much of like the everyday New York life that I just needed a break from it. And it kind of, the first 2 months I was fine. One of the things I had to do though at the beginning was cut off the news, because I've never seen death rates put on the news every single day like that. And I was just like, seeing death rates every day is just not healthy for anyone, period. Like I I understand that they were trying to show how important it was, but I feel like they could have done it in a healthier way that wasn't so detrimental to so many people's mental health. So I think that on piled on top of all this other stuff made it where you're just having all this stuff happening at once. You're seeing death rates on the news all the time for the first time ever that I can think of anyway. You're dealing with the fact that people are being isolated. I'm somewhat an introvert, extrovert person. So being isolated for me didn't bother me as much at first because I'm like, this is sometimes how I recharge. I need alone time. I was like doing all this self-care because I had so much more time because I wasn't spending an hour commuting on the subway twice a day. Like I was just like, I can do all these things. I started going up to the park that was up the street from my house that I forgot that was there because it's New York. And you forget there are parks that are actually in the city. It's like I started like doing all these things I had never done before. And it was, so for me, that was great in that regard. And then it started to become too much. I was like, why is all my interactions virtual? I was so tired of looking at people on the screen that when someone's like, you want to do a happy hour? No, I do not. If I'm going to drink by myself, I might as well stop pretending like I'm drinking with other people on a screen. Like this just doesn't make sense anymore. And so like after a while, I was just like, this is overwhelming. And for me, one of the things that I was most concerned about was the people who should not be isolating. And that was that's where my biggest concern started to get, because I had a friend, I actually lost a friend to suicide during the pandemic because it just became too much for that person to bear. And I think that's something that was never thought about, was like, how do we ensure people who should not be isolating, people who do have demons that interfere with their thoughts on a regular basis, that need to socialize with other people to combat the demons that are challenging them? Because I've never had a situation, being isolated doesn't cause that for me. Well, at least in situations where I have some control. Whereas there are people who can't do that. The silence is too much for them. There are people who live in very rural areas and who come into the city to get social interactions, and that was taken from them. And so I had more of a concern for other people. Like I moved back home because I was like, I just want to be around family. Being this far away from family with all this like death rate stuff just started making me paranoid. I'm like, what if my family starts dropping like flies? And I'm like, and then I'm sitting up here living in New York when I could be back home with family. And so I moved back home, which made it a bit easier for me. It made it where I could see my nieces and nephews every day and just was able to appreciate their presence. But I think the biggest thing was like losing a friend to suicide during the pandemic. You kind of start to question like, should I have reached out more? Should it like, where did I drop the ball as a friend? And I think that was my biggest challenge, was after his passing, was like questioning where, like, I was so focused on myself that I forgot to like think about people who have bigger challenges of being isolated. That because I was just trying to make sure I was mentally okay, because I kind of tapped into my deployment mode. When I was deployed, I isolate like, it's weird because you're surrounded by people, but I isolated myself. I'd find time to go to the gym alone, even though my command star major was 100% against women going to the gym by themselves. And I was like, Sergeant Major, look, because one of the rapes that happened when we were downrange was actually a male raped another male. And I was like, if anything, you're at higher risk than I am according to the last situation. So like, I think I'm okay. And I was like, and I also have a weapon. Like you do, like, I'm like, if I can't, I'm like, not saying for, it's just one of those things for me. I was just like, I don't think it's fair that my male counterparts get to enjoy freedoms, and they also have the same risk as I do. And I can't enjoy being able to go to the gym by myself. I work night shift in the aid station. There was only one male, one female medic working at night. I'm like, so what, we're supposed to shut the aid station down because I have to go to the bathroom, or for whatever reason, that just doesn't make logical sense. And so for me, I kind of tapped back into that mode of like, how do I control my mental health as much as possible, which was working out. I'm spending time alone, reading books. And that's kind of what I did during the pandemic. But like I said, I think for a lot of people, that time brought up things that they probably have never dealt with. And my biggest problem was also accessing mental health. I was going through the VA, and this is where I no longer use the VA for mental health services, is because of this experience. Their residents couldn't provide mental health services if they lived in a different state. So my therapist lived in New Jersey, but came into Manhattan. And so she wasn't allowed to do services unless we had her supervisor on the call. And for me, like for some people, they were okay with it because the supervisor's camera was off, they wasn't involved, but I don't have a relationship with this person. I built my relationship with you. We were getting through some breakthroughs, and it's like, now I'm having to worry about this third person. Granted, as a social worker, I'm 100% aware that they have to brief their supervisors on your case regardless, but it's very different when you're briefing them and when they're sitting in on the call. like those are just very two different. It's more invasive to me. My privacy is being invaded because I have the right to share what I want to share with who I want to, and I don't want to share that with your supervisor. Because what you share with the supervisor as a clinician is limited. Like you don't have to share all the details of your case with the person. It's like important things, anything that's coming up that should be discussed, but you don't have to share every single minor detail that's not important. And so for me, I just didn't, I stopped, and then they tried to find me someone else. I had moved to Chicago, and then it became another problem. And I was just like, I can't do this. And so I ended up switching to a VSO because I need a consistent mental health. And it's like, I can't get through a breakthrough. And then now I can't see the person I want to see without someone else on the call. And that's not how I was getting services previously. So it just, that was one of my biggest situations when I was getting services.
Thank you, Sidney, for sharing that. The stories we heard during COVID of everybody trying to access care with, with telehealth and with cancellations and not enough providers and that state issue. Thank you for bringing that up, because that came up multiple times in this area, and how someone would have to go to Chicago and then they had to find a new person and all that good stuff. So thank you for sharing your story. We are close to time, so I just wanted to throw one more question to the four of you. Healing and protecting your mental health. And we'll start with Susan, Maria, Ashley, and Sidney. We've covered a lot of ground today, but now I want to pivot to healing as a subject. What have you all done? So what have you done incredible things in your service and as veterans? I'd like to know how you heal. What are your methods that you found help you with your own healing journey? So Susan.
Right. So I guess if you want to talk about healing journey, I've always been an avid runner. I developed asthma when I was in the Army. It was really bad. And so I get help for it now. But part of what I did was I was on the Army 10-miler team in 2 different posts when I was there. And now I just came back from Boston. So my method was just pretty much to run. That's the only thing I think I've been running for like 30 years now. But marathons, because it's a lot of things you can do on your own. You can meet people from every walks of life, all different backgrounds. And so far I've run, I think like my 18th or 19th 26.2 mile marathon. So that's the only way I know. I've traveled pretty much around the world. I'm doing the Abbott World Marathon Majors. So I'm running London this year, and I have just Tokyo, and I'll be finishing the Big 6. So that's how I heal, I guess. Running and just using that and traveling, even on my own, doesn't matter. So that's how I've been healing. I don't know if that's the answer, but that's what I know. So
yeah, I've added. Kristen told me about your running ventures because that's part of my toolkit is running. I started running 5 years ago. I never thought I would run a marathon, and I've done New York City twice and Marine Corps various times, and I'm venturing to do Marine Corps this year again. But it does that. I always tell people my first mile is the most therapeutic mile that you'll ever have, because you start, grabbing your breath and you start focusing, and it does help. So thank you so much for sharing that. Maria, what is your healing? What do you use to heal?
So I think healing is really like an active verb, right? I don't think we're ever going to get back to how we were before. I just think it's actively doing your best at where you're at that day. And I think for me, it's been very awakening to have that self-awareness of when I'm running low, and I give myself grace, like, hey, today is not going to be a good day. My hair is not going to get done. I'm going to be in a hoodie. It is what it is, right? And some days I'm like, power woman world, watch out, because I'm starving, I'm going to take over. But so having that, allowing myself that grace of understanding my waves. But as you know, for me, art has always been my way of processing life instinctively. I mean, I've been an artist all my life since I can remember. So for me, clay, it has been the one thing that centers me. I have a hard time meditating. I can't sit down and because I'm always having to move around. But when I'm sculpting, I could sit there for 10 hours and I forget to eat and I forget to do anything. And it takes me into a flow state where I have really, really powerful and insightful conversations with myself, where I've learned to really understand me. Just yesterday, I was at a women's business luncheon, and one of the women said that we move forward with our life, but we understand it backwards. And that for me, that's what that clay affords me. I can look into the future, and as I'm working, I get to really understand how and why I'm the woman I am today, you know, and everything that has brought me to that. Like Sidney mentioned before, even before we went into the military, we already had our cups half full, maybe quarter of a way full with environmental liquid. And so for me, this journey of understanding what makes me tick and what has shaped me and how I navigate life, it's been very empowering to be able to own my story through my art and be able to share that. And so for me, part of my healing is not only sharing my narrative, but then creating a platform for other veterans to share their own narratives as well. Because the veteran community, as a large, we have so many different backgrounds, so many different diverse, individuals. And I think it's kind of like pointillism, right? All of us make this huge, big picture, but when you look up really close, like all of us are unique and colorful, and we have this very unique perspective of what our service meant. And so, yeah, so for me, it's healing through art, through helping others have a voice, and just creating a community, a very creative community, and reconnecting.
Thanks, Maria. Ashley, what does your healing look like?
So therapy is a big one. I've just recently started again. And in doing so, I've made a lot of realizations that there's a lot of stuff that I haven't dealt with because I've always just dove headfirst into helping others. And so one of the big breakthroughs is understanding that, serving under DAT, I was constantly helping other people and not looking at myself and making sure that I was okay and worrying about, where are you at with your identity and having to hide so much of who you are in your life. And then all of a sudden you can share that. And so it's a lot of learning and growth and learning, how to tell my story and dive into that story. And, it brings up a lot of things that had happened along the way. So through therapy, that's one of the biggest things of healing for me. And through that, it's getting back to the outdoors. For me, the outdoors, it's very grounding. You can just stand in the woods for hours and look at things, right? You can listen to the leaves, you can listen to the animals, and you can, depict out, what bird is that? And so it's very healing and very grounding for me. So I'm hoping through this journey that I'll finally be able to share pieces of me that I haven't, but also get back into the place that I love the most and find joy in that again.
Great. Thank you, Ash. I love the outdoors. So we should get together and take a hike someplace. So, we're close enough to each other that we could do that. Yeah. And Sidney, what does your healing look like?
My healing has shifted. I kind of like Maria said, it's one of those things where it's an active verb. And I think as you grow, your healing changes and grows with you. So because before I used to just be able to go to the gym. Like that was my kryptonite. Like that's what I needed. That's where I tapped into myself. And now I literally have to drag myself to the gym. So it's not very healing. It's a stressor. So but I do it because it does make me feel better. But for me, healing definitely is more around traveling. That's something I love traveling so much. So when the pandemic happened and I was like, some of my travel was restricted, I was like, oh, I'm gonna go crazy. 'Cause I actually had a couple trips canceled and I was just like, what am I supposed to do? Because that's like my way of like getting out, taking time out for yourself. Because sometimes depending on where you go, your phone doesn't work. So it forces you to kind of disconnect from the world. Like I remember I was in Cuba. In order to use my phone for anything, I had to go to like these internet hotspots. So I always have to be intentional. I'm like, okay, if I get on this phone, I have to do X, Y, and Z because I'm only paying for 15 minutes. But it made it where I was so connected to what was going on in my life outside. Like it made it where I wasn't always attached to my phone. And that's what traveling does for me. It makes it where I remove myself from my daily life and I get a little free. So that's something that I've started to pick back up again. I go to therapy. That's something where it's hard because just like me, I come from a community where talking about mental health just is not a thing. Like it's still a stigma that hasn't quite has been broken yet. It's something everyone in the community is working on, but I still, even though I'm a huge advocate for it, I encourage people to go. Like myself, I struggle so much, but I do it because every time I do have a moment where I'm able to be vulnerable with my therapist, it helps me grow just that much more. Even though sometimes it is work. Like sometimes I will dance around an entire conversation and then in the session with the bomb. And she's like, you couldn't have said that like 45 minutes ago. And I'm like, yeah, I was going to, but I just didn't know how to get to it. So it always helps and so now I get closer to her in the middle of the session, I might drop a bomb on her versus like when we only have 5 minutes left to process what I just said. And so that's something that I really do for my healing. And hobbies, I know everyone's telling you to make profit off your hobbies. Scratch that. I literally pay for my hobbies. Like I go ice skating every Saturday. It's something I do because my mom told me if I gave her 2 years of ballet, she'd give me ice skating lessons. Never got my ice skating lessons. So like doing that now actually is one of those things where it heals that inner child that wanted something that I never could get. And so like just being able to tap into things that I used to want as a kid and couldn't get now, or at some point in my life where I was relying on someone else to give it to me, I try giving it to myself now. And I have to say, I don't bring it up to my mom that I never got ice skating lessons because I'm in them now. I actually invited her to my session last time and I was like, you can come if you want. And so it was one of those things where that's kind of what I've been doing for my healing, is finding hobbies that bring me joy. And that make me happy, because like I struggle with going backwards while ice skating, and I finally started going backwards last week, and I was like, oh my goodness, I'm growing. So that's kind of what I do for my healing journey. It's constant, it changes, because I hate the gym now, but ice skating is my thing. So yeah.
Okay, so thank you so much, and thank you to the panelists today for sharing your stories, sharing your insights, your experiences. It was a pleasure to be with you all today. So thank you, Susan. Thank you, Maria, Ashley, and Sydney. It was such an amazing experience. And thank you all for joining us today. And I'm going to pass it on to Kristen so she could close us out for today's event.
Thank you all so much. Like each one of our panelists, to include Jen, who dropped off earlier. I mean, you all are rock stars. Like, thank you so much for sharing who you are and your experiences, your insights, and being vulnerable about your experiences. Just really deeply appreciate that. I know that I related to every one of you. So thank you for reflecting that. And Lucy, thank you so much for being an incredible moderator. It is such an honor to partner with Minority Veterans of America and to get to spend this time with each one of you. Thank you to all of our attendees. Look for a follow-up email from me linking to the resources that we mentioned here. Also, thank you for mentioning the outdoors. We have a growing partnership with the New York State Outdoor RX Coalition, which I'll include a link to that as well. And I'll include some links to some of these resources and organizations that we mentioned today so that you can follow up. Also, we want you to connect with any resource that you need. Please let us know. Again, it would be our honor to serve serve you here at the New York State Division of Veteran Services. So thank you all for your time today. Have a great day and look for a follow-up from me. Thank you all.
Thank you.